Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a jam-packed show for you today with some on-the-ground reporting from the Democratic National Convention, which is well underway. We're going to be talking about it here all week, including on Fridays. We're both hosting the Friday show this week.
All week, literally every single day.
Working hard for you, the viewer, so let's get right to it. Yesterday night, we were treated to the unexpected arrival of Kamala Harris making an appearance. Let's check that out. Then there was the very late President Joe Biden. Was Sleepy Joe snubbed again? Some people on the right certainly think so. This was, after all, supposed to be his big night, but he did not start speaking until extremely late. His remarks began about 10:25 p.m. Central Time, meaning he was outside of primetime hours. Let's watch some of his speech.
As your president, I've been determined to keep America moving forward, not going back, to stand against hate and violence in all its forms, to be a nation where we not only live with but thrive on diversity, demonizing no one, leaving no one behind, and becoming the nation that we profess to be. I also ran to rebuild the backbone of America, the middle class. Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, President and Vice President of the United States? MAGA Republicans found out the power of women in 2022. And Donald Trump is going to find out the power of women in 2024. I'm proud that I've kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and that taps in to the full talent of our nation. The most diverse cabinet in history, including the first black woman of South Asian descent to serve as vice president, and will soon serve as the 47th president of the United States.
Biden went on to explain that he's passing the torch to Kamala Harris.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. We've not only gotten to know each other, we've become close friends. She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity, Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke. But she'll be a president our children can look up to. She'll be a president respected by world leaders because she already is. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be a historic president who puts her stamp on America's future.
Then the president said, don't worry, he's not angry at the Americans who called on him to step down and not run in 2024.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true. I love my country more, and we need to preserve our democracy. In 2024, we need you to vote. We need you to keep the Senate. We need you to win back the House of Representatives. And above all, we need you to beat Donald Trump. And elect Kamala and Tim. America, I gave my best to you. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you.
Now, some criticism I've heard a lot of people on the left have, many people are saying, Robby, that the speeches last night from Biden to AOC just lacked substance. Not a lot of talk about what's on the actual agenda, a very personal night. Let's talk about us and our team and who we are. And I think Biden's speech definitely had that. It also had the vibe of like someone got too drunk, some uncle or dad got too drunk at the family like function. And it's like, all right, everybody, I love you guys. Haven't we had so much fun?
I was a little surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. It's amazing how actually not bitter he sounded. He just gave an affirming, positive speech to a den of jackals, a pit of vipers, a group of people who stabbed him in the back, who stole from him his ability to run for president again, and he just said, "Love you guys," and they said, "Oh, we love you, Joe." I mean, that's the people who did it to him, and he had a smile on his face. It was also way past his bedtime and ours and everyone that he was speaking so late. And a lot of people on the right are suggesting that was a further way to humiliate Joe, is to have him so late that people weren't even watching, that was by design because the DNC doesn't want to have the optics of being associated with Joe Biden at all, given how unpopular he is. So this was like, well, he's got to speak. He's speaking night one. It's really late. Nobody's watching anymore. And now he's gone. He's out. We're done with him. We're moving on. Really not very nice treatment of this guy, but he put up with it, and now the party formally moves on to Kamala Harris.
I'm going to say something that sounds nice, and I just want to be very clear. It's not.
Okay.
Joe Biden, I believe he full-heartedly believed that he was the only guy who could beat Donald Trump. And I think now he has seen that, he's not. Look at the polls. Look at how Kamala Harris is polling nationally. I really think that's what happened. I think that's why he was clinging on. Because going into this, it's very clear he just wanted to be president. And then I think after this term, he grappled with the fact that, yes, he did say he was a transition president. He did say he intended to pass the torch. He wanted to beat Donald Trump. And I think that's where we're at, is he was clinging on to it because he felt he was still the only guy who could beat him.
Well, he was the headliner last night, but there were a lot of other interesting speeches too by Hillary Clinton and AOC that we're going to get into with some guests later on the show. One other moment of his speech that I wanted to highlight was what he said about how the Biden administration shepherded the nation out of COVID. Let's watch what he said about the reopening schools policy during COVID.
Look at their Project 2025. We want to do away with the Department of Education. Well, during the pandemic, Kamala and I helped states and cities get back their schools back open. And we gave public school teachers a raise.
So a lot of people on the right are jumping on those remarks, saying that far from helping to reopen schools, Democrats nationally and in various blue municipalities worked extra hard to keep schools closed for as long as possible. Schools were open if they were in red states. If they were private schools, they were more likely to be open. If they were in blue states or they were public schools, they were more beholden to teachers' unions and to Democrats. They stayed shut longer than any other sector of our economy. People went back to work, people were back to bars, people were back to doing things. Schools remained closed, even though kids were the least at risk of a negative COVID health outcome, and schooling is so important. You could make an argument for the opposite, that schools should have remained open even if other things had to shut down, but that's not how it worked. And so there was going to be a lot of, all throughout the night, there was a lot of celebration of how Biden saved us from COVID. But of course, a lot of those policies, I even heard like Chris Wallace, formerly of Fox, but now a CNN person, he said he thought they were engaged in some revisionist history, talking about all these great policies that saved us from COVID.
Yeah, I think about the closing of schools, and I think about how dangerous it is when people in government jeopardize the education of the people, especially the working class, thinking of Reagan's old education advisor saying, we have to ensure that higher education is not something everyone can attain because an educated proletariat would be dynamite. It would be a bad thing. And that's why I think we should all be very cautious that many Republicans are in favor of defunding the Department of Education.
Oh, I'm in favor of that.
I know you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's just very scary to
the Department of
want
Education
people to have access to
it's just a
education.
massive federal bureaucracy that determines who gets various grants. We could fund education. We can fund the schools without the massive federal bureaucracy, and in fact did. The Department of Education is only as old as is only a few decades old. We can do public funding of education without having to administer it on this massive, inefficient federal level.
I'm glad I am sitting next to someone who thinks that, but I don't think Republicans believe that we should keep funding public schools in the same way we are today.
Fund them. There's a difference between funding them and publicly funding them and having them be publicly run. Most Republicans I know support funding public education, but do the governments literally have to run the schools and have all the policies for the schools? And again, at the federal level, why can't we just give the money to the people and let them spend that money on whatever educational option makes the best sense for their individual family or their individual child? That's what I would say we should do. But we will have much more discussion of the DNC coming up on Rising. Stay with us.
TikTok has been known for having pro-Palestinian posts on the app significantly outnumber pro-Israeli posts. The head of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, was caught on a leaked audio back in March saying, quote, "We have a TikTok problem." Since then, the TikTok ban bill has passed, but TikTok creators have had their content on the war on Gaza censored, including Jessica Burbank, aka Ka Burbank, that is me. I have been censored on TikTok. A video of mine was taken down over the weekend for, quote, violent extremism. My account now has a warning on it that it can be deleted if I violate guidelines again. Listen to the clip in question and decide for yourselves.
Israel has used an American-made bomb to target a school being used as a refugee camp, and the death toll is over 90. Ceasefire talks are ongoing in Doha, Qatar. Egypt is at the table as well, Israel and the United States. Hamas is not. The leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, was taken out in a precision strike, as was a leader of Hezbollah. Many people are saying that if Israel has the capacity to conduct precision strikes, why are we seeing entire neighborhoods leveled in Gaza? Elon Musk and Trump sat down for a conversation. There was, of course, all kinds of technical difficulties. It started 30 minutes late, and here's some of what it sounded like.
It's great. And you're an interesting character. The new head of a place called Argentina.
A lot of people just don't understand where inflation comes from. inflation comes from government overspending.
Which is hilarious because if you look at the global indexes, Israel, Greece, Finland, all of these countries had 5 times to 25 times higher inflation rates than the first quarter of 2020 to 2022. So the question becomes, how did Biden pull that off? The polling is now neck and neck while Harris and Walz are drawing crowds so big that Trump has said they're AI. There have been riots all across the UK. People have been attacked and stabbed. They attacked a mosque and they've targeted centers where there are many migrants or Muslims. In response, people who identify as anti-racist activists tried to prevent these crowds from assembling. Elon Musk got in hot water because he posted to X a fake Telegraph article saying Keir Starmer is putting people in detainment camps. This is not true, nor is it a real article. And so he's faced a backlash from the EU. Terry Breton said that if he said anything in his conversation with Trump that was hate speech or misinformation, they would be forced to take action against X and Elon Musk, but they didn't say what kind of action that would be.
So that's the video in full. You can judge if that was violent extremism. And the interesting part of all of this is that the word extremism doesn't even appear in TikTok's community guidelines that I supposedly violated. Violent extremism was the reason I was given for my account going under warning and the removal of that video. But then last night, my video was mysteriously restored without any explanation as to why it was taken down, and for violent extremism, which isn't mentioned in the guidelines at that. So, Robby, free speech is under attack.
Because of the violent extremism that you represent. I feel unsafe every day sitting in this chair. I never know when little Jessica is going to leap at me with her daggers and her claws. No, this is totally ridiculous. I'm glad they restored it. I mean, it might have just been a mistake, but
right.
I mean, it was a mistake. They should not have taken down your video.
Yeah, clearly was a mistake. You know, I don't want to say that it was malicious when I don't know anything. It could just be some kind of incompetence, some kind of mass reporting, or a dedicated group of people that don't like the information I select to put in my news recap.
I mean, at some point, again, widely censoring dissenting opinions on social media is malicious, even if it is just some kind of harmless mistake. They do this so routinely. It feels malicious. It happens enough that it's malicious.
It's a big and powerful tech company that can assess when that's happening. Or it should, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it shows you how dangerous this kind of thing is. So I've been taken off. I've had articles censored on Facebook by their third-party fact-checking organizations, because on Facebook, unlike Twitter, where it's the community notes feature, which I think is really good, including community notes on the story you're noting there that was false that Elon shared, well, it got community noted to death. On Facebook, these third-party independent groups do all the fact-checking, and they're just partisan activists. So I've had articles about, not even articles that were particularly controversial, flagged for COVID reasons. And then, of course, this entire show famously got suspended on YouTube back in the days where it was me and Kim Iverson and Ryan Grimm. I think it was winter. It's got to have been 3 years ago now. The show Rising violated the election integrity policy of YouTube at the time, which said that, and of course, we did not actually violate the policy. We played a clip of Donald Trump in which he made the false claim that the election had been stolen. And apparently, if you're going to show even a clip, you're going to report on somebody doing that, you have to correct them. You know, we've corrected this claim a million times, but in that one clip, we didn't immediately jump in and say, and by the way, because you don't know that that's false, it's false. They suspended the channel, which was crazy. For a week. It killed us.
I sifted through the guidelines. I'm like, what possibly in these could have been violated? Yeah. And there's a part of it where it says, you know, violent groups or violent individuals. If you quote them, you have to say that you don't support that quote. But I never quoted Hamas. Right. The only people who were quoted in that were Terry Breton from the EU, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump, who just said, you're an interesting character. Well, a place called Argentina. And then Elon Musk talked about overspending, which was something that I refuted. So there's like, even within that part of the guidelines, there was nothing. It's just weird that the video had over it, you know, a black screen, this is not accessible to the public, and it said the words violent extremism. This video was taken down for violent extremism. But if that's not in the guidelines, There had to be like a real decision maker who wrote that, because it's not like an auto thing you can report on TikTok. So that's what I find very interesting about this one is I've heard stories that, you know, they have people employed who are like 14 to 17-year-olds who are just going through videos trying to make, you know, the community guidelines enforceable on TikTok, and that's who's reviewing content. I can't imagine they would come up with this idea that the video is violent extremism, though. And that's what's interesting, is with the mass reporting, usually it's something that's on the laundry list of what you can report videos for, but this isn't on that list. So I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe somebody just doesn't like your content and wanted to get you in trouble.
A whole lot of somebodies don't like my content, but I think there are a lot of other people who would like to see it. And so, I don't know, it's kind of crazy what TikTok's been like. It is true. I've experienced it. Creators I know have experienced it, that ever since the TikTok ban bill, it seems that TikTok's taking this approach of really cracking down, reporting on the war. And I think that's why that leaked audio of Greenblatt matters, is because we know AIPAC is a very powerful lobby, and it's suspicious that the ban came around the same time when that was a huge conversation. And so a lot of creators have questions about that and have noticed their content just not gaining traction in the algorithm if it's reporting on the war. And so being censored from talking about what's going on in the world because it's violent is a bad place to be. We should have access to information.
More Rising right after this.
Fired up, that's one way to describe the atmosphere during the first night of the Democratic National Convention, from Joe Biden's passing the baton speech to Harris's surprise address. DNC Night 1 went off without a hitch. Many key players fueled the excitement. Thunderous applause broke out in the arena for New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let's watch.
Ever since I got elected, Republicans have attacked me by saying that I should go back to bartending. But let me tell you, I'm happy to any day of the week, because there is nothing wrong with working for a living.
Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sought to contrast Harris and Trump.
She became a career prosecutor while he became a career criminal. With 34 felonies, 2 impeachments, and 1 porn star to prove it.
And Golden Gate Warriors coach Steve Kerr quoted star NBA player Steph Curry.
After the results are tallied that night, we can, in the words of the great Steph Curry, we can tell Donald Trump, night, night.
And here was Hillary Clinton.
This is our time, America. This is when we stand up. This is when we break through. The future is here. It's in our grasp. Let's go win it.
Joining us now to recap the first day of the DNC is Democratic strategist Nomi Konst. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great to see you. Give us the rundown on the energy at the DNC this past 24 hours.
It was fascinating. I mean, I've been to, and I'm aging myself here, every single convention since 2000 when I was a young 16-year-old, and everything was so exciting and new to me. And I will say that this convention reminded me of that era. I won't say that everybody in the room agrees with each other. You know, DNC delegates are diverse. You have more establishment, moderate delegates, and you have really progressive delegates. And what was interesting is, unlike, say, 2016, where I was on the floor as a Bernie delegate and surrogate, people were unified. I mean, people were who maybe a few years ago were fighting over convention details and platform issues and rules committee procedures, were standing up in unison for Hillary Clinton. I mean, I even found myself a little surprised by how moved I was given her speech. And I think it's really just in the face of what we're up against in Project 2025 and just how brazen Donald Trump is, that I think people really are seeing the vision of the Democratic Party much clearer, and that's playing out on the floor in terms of energy. It's been a rough few conventions, and I gotta say this one is lighter, but we're not. No one's taking this for granted. No one thinks that we're going to go in and win this all the way. I think everyone feels very prepared for what we're up against with Republicans.
It was very tempting to ask you about your skincare routine after you revealing that, but I'll save that for after the show.
In this lighting? Oh my God, I'm in a conference room right now at an event.
Let's talk about AOC's speech. I saw on Twitter, it was blowing up. People were very happy with it. They were saying she's a great orator. For me, the party conventions feel a little bit like political theater. They give me an ick in a way. Maybe that's just me, but tell us about the energy in the room. How did people receive this speech from AOC, who was formerly an outsider to the Democratic Party?
Played a little bit more on TV. I mean, people were excited, and there were some delegations that were chanting her name, but the biggest excitement was, there was a very long standing ovation for President Biden. Honestly, for Hillary Clinton, there was a very large, people were chanting her name, and I think she felt it, and her speech was probably one of the best we've ever seen. AOC was dynamic, exciting. Jasmine Crockett had a great response, but, I think the media really wants to hone in on AOC in every way possible because she's great to discuss. But in terms of the whole lineup, I think she was, up there with many others. But, she brought hope. I think the DNC committee really wanted to highlight the vast differences of the party, how we're a big tent, how the next generation does have energy and ideas and can be witty. Representative Jamie Raskin got a great response from the audience. So she was wonderful, but I don't think she stood out in comparison to this great lineup of other leaders that we were able to showcase.
What was your perspective on Biden's remarks? Biden obviously began speaking very late at night, as some people noted. It was past a lot of people's bedtimes, past the point where actually Joe Biden, right, is supposed to be. We've been told he's on the ball. He knows what he's saying only between certain hours. Giving a speech to a room full of people, many of whom participated in the process to force him to stop running for president. He didn't sound particularly bitter about that, even if maybe he actually is. I would certainly understand if he was. What was your reaction to his speech?
I think he did very well. Listen, we were all very tired. Many delegates and folks who came to the convention faced a little behind the scenes drama here, faced flight issues coming in because there were storms across the East Coast. So I can't tell you how many folks I spoke to, Congress members who slept at or just stayed up all night at the airports in the tri-state region. So on one hand, there was a lot of energy in the crowd, but on the other hand, everyone was complaining that they really needed to sleep. And, of course, there's after parties that people were reluctant to go to. So if we were feeling that, I can't imagine what he was feeling. But in terms of his speech, I think it was very strong. I think he really stepped up. I think the audience was very engaged with him. Folks teared up when, of course, he embraced his daughter and his daughter's opening, Ashley Biden, how she spoke about their relationship, and then how he teared up. It was what Joe Biden does best, and he really took it home. I was watching the teleprompter because that's a fun game you can do, and he went off script a lot too. So it was fascinating to see this person who everyone's criticized for not being able to speak, off script. Or really step up because of his age, but showing that he was still able to do that and deliver a very strong, long speech, mainly about democracy, and giving a lot of credit to Kamala. When they were chanting Joe Biden and thank you, Joe, for, I forgot which one of the things that he accomplished, he said, thank Kamala too. So he knows his role. I'm sure, he doesn't love the fact that he had to step down, but it seems as if he's coming to terms with it. His family was in the front sitting on a couch, and it was really lovely to see them. You could see their reactions and how they were moved when he made certain statements. And so it felt very familial. And that is something I don't remember in other conventions. While, of course, they're performative, this convention, while it was always in production, no one expected Kamala Harris, of course, to be the nominee. So there's been a lot of ad-libbing along the way, including last-minute speakers that I'm learning even today. But with that being said, it's somehow a little bit more intimate. I don't feel that tension that we've had over the years. Even with Obama in 2012, we were pretty much unified, but it didn't have this intimacy. There's something a little bit raw about this convention. And I think that's also why folks are embracing Tim Walz, because he's just more open and down to earth. And somehow that's translating into the crowds. And even in response to Joe Biden, who was the sitting president. So it was a very intimate, emotional experience, I think, for a lot of folks. I saw people crying when he spoke. I saw people crying when Hillary spoke. And of course, I know we'll discuss this later, but a lot of the personal stories of folks who've experienced hardship under Republican, in red states under Republican leadership. So it was a pretty moving convention night.
Abortion's a key issue this election cycle. Donald Trump said he would appoint justices that would overturn Roe. Roe was overturned, and since then, 9 states have put abortion bans into effect that include cases of rape. 5 other states, in addition to those 9, include a ban on abortion in cases of rape at a very early stage or after it's been reported to law enforcement. And now there's a new study out that shows in states where these abortion bans have gone into effect, there have been 64,000 pregnancies as of January in those states as a result of rape. And last night they had Hadley Duvall as a speaker at the DNC, who spoke about being raped by her stepfather at the age of 12. That's when she took her first pregnancy test. And she said she can't imagine not having that choice. Can you talk about that speech from Hadley Duvall and what the energy was around the issue of abortion at the DNC?
You could hear a pin drop. We had chills. I was sitting in a row full of middle-aged men, and they were crying. It was incredibly powerful. Her speech talking about how she was a cheerleader, and she was, I think she said she was homecoming queen. And then she later says, but, I also have been a survivor, and her stepfather raped her, and she was pregnant. And, these are the personal stories that we need to lean into. I think in the past, Democrats have skirted around leaning into the personal, or, in a speech, maybe just quoting one person's experience. I think is a very smart decision on whoever decided to bring in folks to tell their personal narratives about what happens when you are in one of these red states. And it's not just abortion. I mean, they're going after IVF now. They're closing women's health clinics where you could just get your breast examined for potential breast cancer. This is absolutely a war on women. And I think women across the country will definitely relate to that, but so will men. One of the couples that was on stage, the husband of the couple who faced issues when his wife was put in tremendous risk because she was facing a miscarriage. The doctor said they couldn't even say that she had a miscarriage legally. And he stated, this isn't a women's rights issue. This is also an issue for men. And the crowd went crazy. This is clearly an issue that I think is going to sway voters. We're seeing that in other states and off cycles where, Ohio, Florida, where women, whether they're pro-Trump or not, this is a deciding factor. And if we can lean in and potentially earn some men as well who can stay off the sidelines and vote on this issue, I think it's really important. But those were that little chunk of narratives, and also some of the videos where people shared their personal stories. People were incredibly moved.
Nomi Konst, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Apologies for the noise. It's DNC. So
no, you sounded good.
Fun.
We appreciate it.
It's everywhere.
A bold vision for America's future. That is the theme for the second night of the DNC in Chicago. Tonight's headliners include former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama, and will feature Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, as well as Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Joining us now to discuss it all is Rising Friday's host, Amber Duke. Thanks for coming on, Amber.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So tell us what you are looking for tonight, what you are expecting. The Obamas are in town. Democrats love those guys. J.B. Pritzker is a very likable guy. I think even across the aisle, he just has a vibe to him. So what are you looking for? Tell us what you're expecting.
I'm hoping for a little bit more in terms of policy specifics tonight. I think, last night we heard a lot about what the other side wants to do and sort of some fear mongering about the Republican Party, specifically its platform on abortion. We saw that they brought in some regular women who claim that pro-life laws have caused them to be unable to get miscarriage care. But other than that, it was pretty light on policy. And I was talking to some Democrats around the United Center last evening during some of the speeches, and they said the same thing. They said it felt like a lot of platitudes, and I want to hear a little bit more about what specifically they're going to do for the country, what their vision is. So I'm hopeful that tonight maybe we'll get a little bit more of that. That being said, with the Obamas and Barack Obama specifically, it seems like his plan is to sort of chart out more of an idea of who the future of the Democratic Party is rather than what the policy future of the Democratic Party is. So we'll see what happens. But I think we all can agree that last night ran way too late. Somebody's got to do a better job of keeping time in the United Center.
Yes, for sure. That was truly ridiculous. We've heard from other guests we've had on so far that the atmosphere is not as contentious as previous DNCs, where, obviously last time there was, or if you, go back to Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders, there was still some hurt feelings spilling out in the convention in 2016, obviously when Obama ran against Hillary back in 2008, there was still some hurt feelings there. This time, of course, there was no real contest because they just decided to make Kamala Harris the nominee very recently. So there's nothing to be contentious over. Did you see some of that? And, how were people reacting to Joe Biden, a room full of people who participated in his ouster, and he is trying to rally them and actually didn't seem too upset about, I thought he did his job well enough, giving a good speech very late in the evening and really actually seemingly wanting to hand it over to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I think the reason why it didn't feel contentious is for precisely the reason you said, Robbie, which is that everybody in that room that was part of the Democratic establishment wanted Joe Biden to step aside because they felt like they had a better chance at winning with someone who was a little bit more aware of their surroundings, let's say. And so the only real resentment you had is from Jill and Joe Biden and perhaps Ashley, who introduced the president. And they did get emotional, all three of them. And it's very clear that Joe Biden did not really want to step aside. I mean, all of the reporting suggests he was really forced out of the position in terms of running for re-election. And it was actually, some Democrats were saying to me, and some members of the media who I spoke to last night were saying, it's kind of cruel, actually, that not only did the top Democrats force Biden effectively to step aside, but they also gave him a speaking slot that ended up happening at around, what time did it even come on? Like 11 o'clock Eastern, which is way past his approved schedule, according to reporting from Axios. They made him go after all of these sort of newbies to the Democratic Party who were hoping for their star moment. Jasmine Crockett, for example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez earlier in the night. He had to even wait for Hillary Clinton, who a lot of Democrats would wish would just go away. And they took away his potential to even speak in a primetime slot because they failed to keep the convention running on time. James Taylor, they had to actually bump entirely. He had had a set that he was going to perform that he couldn't do. And so it was like, okay, so you sideline Biden and now you also throw him in the latest speaking slot of the night where everyone is exhausted. Nobody wants to listen to speeches anymore. And you force him to go through this and prove, of course, again, that he's capable of doing it, even though most people assume that he's not. And even if he gets through it, somewhat cogently, it's going to confirm all of the priors because it's just a little bit too late for him. So the whole arrangement of it was really, I think, to Biden's detriment. And they almost treated him like a pet that they are just sort of walking around on a leash at this point.
Yeah, I remember like Trump going on at 10:40 and speaking for an hour and a half, Biden speaking around midnight. It's giving the vibe that they don't want people to have a productive day at work the next day. I'm wondering what the economic impacts of these conventions are. I also have big questions as to why people who are not delegates and who are not party officials like going to these events. I'm trying not to be a hater, but I have to be honest. I don't appreciate the political theater. It doesn't make me excited, but it seems that people are very excited to go. And they might be fun. I saw a tweet on X that I'm going to read out. J.B. Pritzker just walked up behind me while AOC began her speech. Wordlessly, he opened a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, poured me a glass, handed it to me, and said, "No one will ever believe you," then walked away. So Amber, I'm wondering, and for the people at home who have never been to one of these, how much of this is a social event?
Yeah, besides whatever J.B. Pritzker's choice in bourbon is, which I can't say I'm a big fan of, I mean, it is definitely a social event, and the Democrats have given credentials to influencers. So they're trying to make this sort of like a party. Same thing in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and we've heard complaints from, with the dysfunction yesterday, the travel related, the storms, people were delayed. I've heard some frustration from media folks about who was able to get press credentials, who the Democrats are prioritizing. Certainly, it seems like the less adversarial, present company excluded, non-adversarial media were more likely to be, given access to what's going on. They really want this to be celebratory and make it sound like we're all on the same page. And obviously, so many in the media are just are pushing Kamala, are promoting her, are giving her coverage that I think is incredibly fluffy even by modern standards.
I will say, just from a logistical standpoint, the convention center in Milwaukee was better organized for media versus delegate entrances. This is sort of like all one funnel, which makes it kind of difficult. And then I heard some media folks complaining that the setup in terms of where the stage is in the arena makes it hard to get a good shot for TV. So in Milwaukee, they put the stage on the long end of the arena. So all of the media had this long, wide part opposite it to get a nice frame shot where it was centered on their cameras. And because the stage here is on the short side of the arena, you have this big oblong area where people are sitting and sort of craning their necks, and then the media has to try to get this shot, but they're really coming in from the side of the stage. So that was one of the more petty complaints that we've heard. But most people are upset about the timing and just the inability to apparently stick to the timing of the speeches. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think just from a standpoint of the organization, the RNC was better.
So I'm curious, with now talks that a ceasefire deal has been reached between the U.S. and Israel, and they're urging Hamas to take this deal that they've come to. There was a banner drop last night among a group of pro-Palestinian activists while Joe Biden was speaking. I've seen videos of people holding up these We Heart Joe sticks with like a sign on them, sort of hitting them in the head, trying to get them to take it down. So there's some tensions around this. Are you expecting anyone to mention the ceasefire deal tonight, given the list of speakers we have?
I would be surprised if they did, just because I think that the speeches to some extent are pre-screened for at least topic. So someone would probably have to go off script in order to do that. But that being said, I did go to the protest yesterday at Union Park. There were about 1,000 people there, and they were not holding back. They had some pretty intense signs calling out the Democrats. I mean, both parties, to be honest, for what they called a genocide. They said that Joe Biden's legacy will be the slaughter of Palestinians. They referred to Kamala as Killer Kamala, and they were chanting that the DNC better watch out because they're going to bring the war home. So, I mean, that's just a short 10-minute walk maybe from the United Center where this protest was taking place, and saw them on my way out last night around 9, 10 o'clock at night. They were still cleaning up from the protest. So they're definitely making it known that they are not happy with either the Democrat or Republican Party. And I think the Democrats are trying as much as they can, at least inside the United Center, to give the impression that there's no daylight among all of them. But obviously right outside, you see that the progressive activist base of the Democrats, and then, of course, people who would not consider themselves Democrats, too, and would probably vote third party. Cornel West was here yesterday, for example, that they're making very clear that they are not satisfied with the direction that the Democrat Party has gone on Israel.
Amber, thank you so much for checking in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, what do you know? MSNBC's Morning Joe was beyond impressed with the first night of the DNC, and he's now claiming Democrats are the more patriotic party. Let's watch.
What Republicans feared the most last night was the joy, but also the chants of USA, USA, USA. And why did that ring true? Because the Republican Party has sold itself to a man who lies about America every day and says we're a nation in decline, who lies about America every day and says we're a nation of losers, who lies about America every day and says that we're just on the verge of collapse. No, not true. The data doesn't bear it out economically, militarily, culturally, socially, in every way. This is a great country. So now the Democratic Party can cheer USA, USA, USA. And it's a hell of a contrast with a presidential candidate on the Republican side that talks down about America every day.
He does have a point saying the Democrats are looking patriotic. Take a look at this Freedom ad the DNC aired last night.
Trying to rain on the thunder. Tell the storm I'm new. I'm a wild, come a march on the regular. Painted white flags blue.
What kind of America do we want? One where we're divided, angry, depressed? Come on. We're Americans. Fascism, we conquered it. The moon, landed on it. The future, building it. Freedom, nobody loves it more.
But not all of the mainstream media were as confident in Vice President Kamala Harris's ability to beat former President Donald Trump. Here's what CNN's David Axelrod said about it.
Look, she has made extraordinary progress. We were all in Milwaukee a month ago, and, you know, there was euphoria there and a sense that this race was over, that they were going to win by a landslide, perhaps sweep in big majorities in the House and Senate, and things have changed dramatically. But this is still a very competitive race. If the election were today, I'm not sure who would win. And I think it may well be President Trump because it's an electoral college fight.
Right.
And in those battleground states.
Yeah, we were looking at national numbers at the top of this program. That's, I mean, it's misleading.
And I've said several times here that, you know, for a Democrat to win those battleground states, they have to have a significant lead in the Electoral College. Remember, Joe Biden won by 7 million votes nationally last time, and a margin of 45,000 votes or 44,000 votes in the three closest battleground states combined. So she's right to be telling people it's good to be enthusiastic. That enthusiasm is really, really important for the Democratic Party, but you have to turn that into energetic action.
Meanwhile, MSNBC's Joy Reid continued to praise what she sees as Joe Biden's heroic transfer of power. Let's watch.
I don't think you've ever seen a more seamless, more affectionate handoff of power from one person to another, both of whom have the aspiration to be president, and both of whom believe that they can occupy that seat, and they shared power in a great way, and the affection was just so palpable.
I mean, just going off that last point by Joy Reid there about what an affectionate handoff, and yeah, there's no bitterness or acrimony. This is because they had no real democratic process. They just coronated her as the nominee. They ousted Joe Biden, made her the nominee. If there's no contentiousness, it's because they didn't do what they did in all of those previous conventions where there was an actual contest between different candidates and there were debates and the people picked. So I guess if you just totally short circuit the entire democratic process, then yes, there's no contentiousness. Maybe you can see that as a positive attribute. I don't know that that's the way that people see it, but fine.
I don't know. They were on the same team. She was the vice president. It just doesn't seem weird to me that this is how it happened. When someone becomes the vice president, they win on that ticket, there's a chance they'll become the president.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Joe Biden was the vice president, and he had to run for the nomination in 2020 against a bunch of other candidates. It wasn't just handed to him. Barack Obama didn't just get to go, I doth thee the next Democratic candidate. He had to run for it. Kamala Harris did not, but that's fine. I've made a lot of, I've made an issue about this a number of times. People don't see it the same way as me. That's fine, not a big deal. What do you make of the idea that the Democrats are the patriotic party, Jessica?
I will say one more thing on the
go
earlier
ahead.
point. When someone retires or unfortunately passes away and they're serving in Congress, there is a process to appoint someone, usually the governor of the state. I'm pretty sure that's how it works everywhere. The governor of the state decides who gets to replace them. And so that's not a very democratic process, but people will get to vote for Harris in November.
Has Biden he hasn't stopped being the president.
No, he hasn't, but he stopped running his campaign.
Yeah, when somebody dies in office, somebody gets appointed to replace them.
Or if they
temporarily,
choose to step aside, they get replaced as well.
Temporarily, in order to give time for the democratic process to function so that someone can be elected to that position.
Well, usually what happens is when the governor is someone of the same party, they will choose to retire during their term so they can appoint someone, and then that person has incumbent's advantage and will be more likely to win the seat.
Okay.
And that happens all the time. But, okay, let's talk about the patriot thing.
Patriotism.
Patriotism.
We love it.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good to center the messaging around freedom. I think that's very smart at a time when abortion's an issue that a lot of Americans want to protect the right to abortion. And Democrats have that as like the most popular issue that they can run on. And framing that as freedom and framing the ability to just afford housing and groceries as freedom, because you don't have freedom if you can't afford basic necessities. If all you're thinking about all day long is how am I going to make ends meet, that's not a very free way of living. And so I think just this framing around freedom and using the American flag is very smart.
I mean, I think using the American flag and patriotism and freedom are rhetorically smart things for political figures to do because freedom is popular. I would say that I think it's very cynical, and the Democrats' policies are not pro-freedom whatsoever, as evidenced by Tim Walz being on the ticket, someone who adopted all of the same blue state anti-freedom policies during COVID. It's rich for them to be saying, yes, we're all about leaving you alone and letting you make your medical decisions and not interfering in that. These are the ideological leaders of the lockdowns and mandates for masks and vaccines, for keeping schools closed, for doing all of the interfering, annoying, obnoxious COVID policies that Democrats became known for when it became a partisan issue. And they're saying, no, we're going to be the leave you alone people. And I agree with you that more needs to be done to make food, housing, other things more affordable. The Democratic approach to that is to literally set the price of those things or to subsidize them in the ways that I think are going to make them more expensive. So I don't know that that's freedom policies, but the freedom messaging is certainly what they're going for. And yes, it's smart. I don't think the policies are good, but maybe people will believe that that's something resembling freedom is what's being offered up by the Democrats.
I don't know. I think Walz's popularity, we're saying that he has a much higher net favorability rating than J.D. Vance does. And I think that's because J.D. Vance has spent so much time talking about women and talking about having families and talking about restricting the right to abortion that, I really credit his favorability rating being so low to that. Mm-hmm. And the framing around freedom and how Walz has always been protective of LGBTQ rights when he was, in the high school where he was the football coach at, where he was a social studies teacher at, he was this military vet and he sponsored that club. I think all of those things are more positive protections of civil liberties and freedom than what we're seeing from the other side right now.
More Rising right after this.
Speaking. What night are you speaking? Are you speaking tonight? Or no? Hey, you're not. If you took that stage, you would get booed off of it. You would get booed off the stage.
That was Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz confronting former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy at the Republican National Convention in July. The firebrand Republican was successful in toppling McCarthy last year. Now he's got his eyes set on winning his primary against Navy veteran Aaron Dimmick, who McCarthy has endorsed.
Gaetz, who sits in a ruby red seat in Northwest Florida, will likely cruise to victory in the primary and win re-election in November. There have been whispers he might make a gubernatorial run down the line, but Gaetz's aspirations might be thwarted by several factors. For instance, he's still under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for alleged sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, accepting improper gifts, and attempting to obstruct government investigations of his conduct. And he's proven to be a thorn on the GOP caucus's side by orchestrating McCarthy's ouster and putting an already razor-thin Republican majority on the line. Former President Donald Trump has endorsed Gaetz in the race, which is turning out to be one of the costliest congressional races in the Sunshine State this cycle. Per Ad Impact, both Gaetz and his opponents have shelled out over $5.1 million so far. Currently, 538 polling shows Gaetz walloping Dimmick by 47 points. Gaetz is polling at 67% compared to Dimmick's 20%.
Yeah, there's no chance that Matt Gaetz loses here. He is going to be reelected. And he takes the position that, he is trying to put forth, this is in Matt Gaetz's telling from his perspective, he's been working to fight for things conservatives want, the MAGA base of the Republican Party wants, and that has put him at odds with leadership, and so that they have investigated him for things that he says are illegitimate. For instance, he's really pushed the congressional stock trading ban, and he claims that that has put him in a contentious relationship with many of his colleagues, more establishment Republicans who want to continue doing stock trading, and of course there's Democrats who want to continue doing stock trading, and that's why he's had this bad relationship with leadership. Now, I know people, including, for instance, Representative Thomas Massie on the Republican side, who was in support of getting rid of McCarthy, but has said that the new speaker is not really an improvement, and it was basically a waste of effort, and it did come down a little bit to personality, and so it hasn't actually helped matters. But yes, the rivalry, the enmity between Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy goes back to Kevin McCarthy allowing an investigation into these ethical accusations against Gaetz.
Right. Now, McCarthy's endorsed Dimmick, the opponent, retired Navy pilot, a PAC that is, a PAC that's aligned with McCarthy. The Freedom Allies PAC is running ads about this alleged misconduct. There are Venmo transactions that are allegedly payments for sexual activities. Of course, he was under investigation from the DOJ about having sex with a 17-year-old, with a minor. That investigation resulted in them withdrawing the lawsuit.
Yeah, that was, I'm not sure, I want to be careful with what the details of that were, because it had to do with, it was being rounded up to sex trafficking by people who were looking into it, because he traveled with, I think, a 17-year-old on a plane, across state lines.
Jet. Yeah.
I don't know that it was proven or demonstrated that they had a sexual relationship. The whole thing seemed a little fishy to me, and there was this whole plot line with that he was being blackmailed essentially by this other donor guy. It was all very strange. It was certainly worth looking into, but I do think there were incendiary anti-Matt Gaetz headlines from the mainstream media because they don't like him, and actually a lot of Republicans don't like him either, because he's actually fighting for things that supporters of Donald Trump want to happen. So I don't know.
Right, yeah. I think that, it's tricky when you have people who are very powerful have people make claims against them and then withdraw those lawsuits. We've seen this happen time and again, and there's some kind of settlement that happens. We've seen this happen with the royal family, people involved with Jeffrey Epstein, where they receive a sum of money and then they're quiet. I think, Gaetz would be very smart to not intervene with any of these investigations. Of course, if anything were to come of them, that would be the time he's vulnerable in a primary. If he's found guilty of misconduct in any of these, and there's substantial evidence that, he did either have sex with a minor or pay people for sex.
I mean, it was not, again, and I've pulled it up now, a 17-year-old is not a minor, depending on what state you're in. So the problem was that they were on a flight together. But the Justice Department ended the sex trafficking investigation. They did not charge him with any crimes. And part of it was information given to them by this Joel Greenberg fellow, who is a former associate of Gaetz, who pleaded guilty to sex trafficking and all sorts of other stuff. And it looked like a whole kind of blackmailing deal.
Yeah, there were multiple cases that had to do with this, and the Venmo transactions and all of these things that are being reviewed by Congress. That's what's in the ethics, hearing. The ethics committee is reviewing all of that. I think it's possible that McCarthy's faction of the Republican Party, if they keep running these kinds of attack ads, I think they could have an effect. We've seen attack ads be effective before. $3 million goes a long way, and that's how much this McCarthy-aligned PAC has given, and that's what they're spending it on. So, it could hurt his image. It could bring more awareness to this investigation that he sort of brushes off whenever he's asked about it. So I think he's going to keep his seat. This polling is significant, but
yeah, imagine. A lot of people got to be thinking, imagine if Republican elites put as much effort into, spend as much time and money on doing things that conservatives actually want them to do as they do fighting with Matt Gaetz or picking off people they think are kooky like him. I think they'd be a more effective party, a more popular party with their own base, but alas.
Yeah, I think Matt Gaetz represents that sort of populist faction, McCarthy the more establishment faction of the party, and populism's alive and well in the United States, and I think that's going to have him keep his seat. I think they see this as, an attempt to slander him since the accusations are from 11 years ago.
Yes, indeed. All right, that does it for us today on Rising. We will be obviously watching the Democratic National Convention tonight, featuring the Obamas making an appearance. We'll have some reaction to that tomorrow. Of course, later in the week, we'll be watching for Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. In the meantime, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. We will see you back here tomorrow.
Bye.